Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the last BFA news segment before the launch of the expansion. And before we begin, thank you all so much for the amazing views on the last episode. It's one of the first videos of mine to hit middle-of-the-road, double-digit views in such a short time frame, and since I will take that as a sign you all enjoyed that video, let's begin with another one. So last time we discussed some of the misconceptions people have about the Dark Lady. Things like Anderhall, Gilneas, the Broken Shore, and a couple of other interesting topics. With the expansion so close to launching and having convinced myself that the flasks, augment runes, Vantus runes, and other items that were extremely useful in Legion that are inevitably falling by the wayside for things like Deep Sea Satin and other neatly named crafting items at BFA, I decided to pay a visit to the auction house to cash in on some tiny profits. I actually made 40,000 gold. My only 40,000 gold. I was also hoping to further postpone the inevitable shock and potential disappointment of the pre-patch content. Afterwards, having finally swallowed my fear and worked up my courage, my warlock entered the lion's den of controversy, faction pride, and burning birchbark, the War of Thorns. Having seen people on both sides protesting Sylvanas' brash actions, people threatening to faction change, to the Alliance brought up thoughts of Blizzard playing Mr. Burns, just sitting there tapping their fingers together going, "Excellent." All the free faction change dollary dues coming their way. People showing which person they're siding with in BFA by removing their shoulder pads like Saurfang did in the exceptional Old Soldier cinematic. People obviously aren't happy. Meanwhile, no one really knows how the story will pan out, so choosing a side at this point is just jumping the gun, at least in my opinion. Since we have both the Burning of Teldrassil and the Battle of Lordaeron to cover, I'm going to give my opinions on both sides' takes on the conflict leading up to the full-scale war happening in just 5 days. Let's start with the Burning of Teldrassil. So at the start of the Horde's war march into Darkshore, everything seemed to be going okay. We faced off against Malfurion at least 2 or 3 times, and we fought tooth and nail for every inch of ground as we went along, because of course the Night Elves don't want to give up their sacred homeland. Sylvanas used her Banshee Queen power to open a breach in a wisp wall to let the Horde troops through, which I thought was rather selfless. We slowly cut away the aid of the forest in the forms of the Ancients, the Owls, and the Druids themselves. Found some Azerite and used that to help push the war in our favor, retreating from a stalemate. All the while, that epic in-game music marshaled us forward. And then it happened. I thought everyone was exaggerating. I thought maybe someone else had lit the tree on fire. But no. Then Darkshore happened. Saurfang, like many other orcs, has an overwhelming sense of honor. They're much like the Klingons in that respect, and when Saurfang intervened in between the fight versus Sylvanas versus Malfurion, he felt like he had dishonored a mighty opponent in the mighty Shondo Stormrage. Despite his initial belief in saving his Warchief at all costs, we later see in that amazing Old Soldier cinematic that he's rapidly becoming disenfranchised with both the war and Sylvanas. And speaking of Sylvanas, that Darkshore cinematic, holy shit. The fact that her tears are those dark scar marks under her eyes, the fact that she underestimated Arthas by midriff sliding into melee range. Ultimately it was a smart idea, I guess. You want to slice the enemy's head off or maybe kill his horse. Uses Frostmourne, instantly just rips her soul right out, completely devastates the field all around her, kills all the plant life, and we see the mother and child, the young baby who Sylvanas tried to usher to safety, dead, lifeless and cold on the ground. And of course then we saw Sylvanas and her true light when Commander Sunmoon of the Alliance's Teldrassil moment decided to, at least in Sylvanas' mind, mock Sylvanas.
Don't grieve. You'll soon join your loved ones.
I grieve for you. You've made life your enemy. And that is a war you'll never win. You can kill us, but you cannot kill hope.
Can't I?
Burn it. Burn it!
I could go into the semantics of why mocking someone or even trying to reason with a tyrant who has about as much temperamental discipline as Adolf Hitler is a bad idea, but let's move on. So, one of the main things a lot of people want to bring up is the innocents that were slaughtered. When we have the issue of portals, now, we have portals like in the Warcraft movie. Surely, if we have the Warcraft movie's portal that Medivh opened, couldn't we have done something like that? Secondly, Sylvanas had her soul ripped out of her body, and she essentially became her soul. is what the cinematic tried to portray. Her old body doesn't really exist anymore. It's been decayed, it's rotted, it's a skeleton now or something. We see it when she screams and she turns into the red-eyed banshee that we know today, but still. The whole thing that maybe she might not have her soul anymore is up for debate. I mean, she shows things like hatred, joy when she burns down the tree, and kind of a bit of agitation when Sun Moon says that she pities her. So all of these things, by popular belief, are the realm of one's soul. Secondly, the debate that Sylvanas is unfeeling and remorseless. I mean, she's dead. She's an undead queen that's been through countless wars, countless battles. She's had to put up with other leaders telling her off for doing what she seems to think is an acceptable sacrifice for a greater whole. And she had to suffer directly with Garrosh, which she then tried to assassinate, and that fell through because someone told him, and then she wanted to kill that person, although it was her sister. I don't remember that whole story that well. Sylvanas, I don't think, wanted to burn the tree as much as she said, you know what, you guys have such a huge belief in your hope, let me just make a burning example of everything your alliance holds dear, in this sort of fucked up Roman scorched earth kind of thing. And then we have to look at everyone's favorite Emerald Nightmare Eyeball, Il'gynoth. Now, Il'gynoth says at random some whispers that are seemingly coming true in BFA. Chief among the few, 5 keys to open our way and 5 torches to light our path. Now, a few of the other ones is the Boy King sits at the Master's table, 3 lies he will offer you. The King of Diamonds has become a pawn. Now, let's talk about the first one before we go into 2 of the major ones. So, 5 torches to light our path, 5 keys to open our way. So, the 5 keys likely references the Pillars of Creation, which the Titans used to terraform Azeroth for all living creatures, and also used them to seal away the 4 old gods. Now, we recently used the 5 Pillars of Creation to seal the portal system that the Legion had created to enter Azeroth through the Tomb of Sargeras. Maybe that's weakened it, and maybe N'Zoth can get free now? Speaking of N'Zoth, one of the other ones is to find him, drown yourself in a circle of stars. Now, obviously, N'Zoth is an aquatic old god. He is in Ny'alotha, which is also called the Drowned City. So it could be possible that we will be fighting him this expansion. We know we're going to be fighting Ashara. To go back to the 5 keys to open our way, 5 torches light our path. The 5 torches could very well be the world trees. Now, there are 5 world trees that have existed throughout World of Warcraft. We have Teldrassil. Well, that was just burned. That's a literal torch. We have Vordrassil, Shaladrassil, and the Il'gynoth tree. That's 3 more. What's the only tree left standing? Nordrassil. What happened during Cataclysm? Well, Ragnaros wanted to burn down the World Tree. Why? Because he's an agent of the old gods. The elemental lords have always, at some stance, served the way of the void. So if the final World Tree goes down, that's all of the natural wards against the void. The other 2 major ones are her heart is a crater and we have filled it, and at the hour of her 3rd death, she ushers in our coming. Now, here's the interesting thing, is because Sylvanas, you could say she's died 3 times. She died once before she became the Banshee Queen, then she killed herself by throwing herself off Icecrown Citadel, and then Crowley shot her in the back at Gilneas. Well, technically, if we're going to go off logic here, it could be mentioning her deaths post Banshee Queen, so she's only died twice. Once by throwing herself off the Icecrown Citadel onto the Jagged Rocks, and secondly when Crowley shot her in the back. Now here's the interesting thing, because if that's true, that means as much as we hate Sylvanas, she can't die. Anduin mentioned in the cinematic surrender or die, and that raises some questions. If Nordrassil burns and Sylvanas dies a 3rd time, we may very well see the introduction of the Void Lords, who up until this point have been quoted as being so large they cannot normally fit into our reality. Moving on away from the speculatory stuff, Sylvanas ends up burning the World Tree. Now, for the Alliance side of this, most of it's pretty much the same. You're dealing with Commander Sun Moon, you're going with her, and you're helping out Malfurion here and there. But when you go into Astronar, which is the first place you go through on the Horde, you go through with a rogue and you start poisoning the guards. Here's the thing, you only kill the guards. The weird thing is that Sun Moon says the civilians have been killed, but Forsaken are responsible. Now, one of 2 things has likely happened. Sylvanas had the Forsaken rogues that she has under her command kill the innocent after she marched through, which, I mean, considering she put a full living tree full of innocents to the torch after someone so much as felt pity for her, it's not really surprising. But we can't forget the Wrathgate, where a rogue band of Forsaken launched the plague on both the Lich King and the Alliance and Horde indiscriminately. So, it could be a system like the Court of Owls from the Batman universe, which is essentially this puppeteering crime syndicate that kind of runs things from the shadows. Moving forward, we did much of the same stuff as the Horde did, with the stalemate and whatnot, but we came to possibly the darkest moment in all of the instance, or all of the quest chain, when we were tasked to save 982 people in 3 minutes. Now, as a demon hunter who has high mobility, I only managed to save a paltry 60 people before my character collapsed due to smoke inhalation. That means 922 people burned to death in the fires of Teldrassil. And I'm only assuming that because I didn't see 982 people running through portals. Why the Darnassian priestess stayed to burn with the trees beyond me, but Gen Greymane's wife barely survived the smoke just as we did. So one thing's for sure, in order to really get the full scope of a story, you have to look at it not from one lens, but from two, the Horde and the Alliance's perspective. Now one thing is certain, regardless of how tragic a, quote, anti-hero Sylvanas is, she now has the blood of 922 innocent men, women, and children on her hands. And that is unforgivable.
There is no honor in this. They will come for us now. All of them!
After watching the Old Soldier cinematic, because it takes place in between Teldrassil and Battle for Lordaeron, I can feel Saurfang's pain. All that he's been through, the First and Second Wars, leaving his son on Draenor, mourning his son's cold, lifeless body on the frozen wastes of Northrend after ICC, and then feeling so guilty that he played such a part in the murder of innocents that he would go and seek his death at the hands of the Alliance. It's tragic, it's sad. It moved me to tears to think that I once defended someone with such honor that, in the end, Sylvanas kind of showed her true colors. Regardless of what happens, I'm going to stand with Saurfang, for he has honor. And honor is something that makes and shapes people's code of ethics, which Saurfang has. Moving on to the Battle for Lordaeron, after composing myself in the wake of the slaughter of countless innocents, let's start with the Horde, since it's what I mainly play. To which I'm going to say, what the actual flying fuck? Where do we begin with this doozy of a scenario? Well, let's begin with everyone's favorite, Sylvanas. Everyone's divisive, let's commit all the war crimes, I'm Garrosh 2.0 banshee twat. The battle turns out fine. We're pushing the Alliance engagement back, and then we called out our Azerite constructed war machine. Then Sylvanas really showed how dark and twisted she really is.
Light! Let it rain down upon their armies!
There must be another way, Warchief.
This is no time for sentiment, High Overlord. War demands that we take a more direct approach.
She used, without a care in the world, Blight, the thing that kills people, the thing that is equivalent to mustard gas. She killed Horde soldiers and resurrected them, because why not? I commit war crimes all day. Killing children? Pfft, no biggie. Resurrecting our dead soldiers out of stuff? Why the fuck not? And the worst part, after the amazing introduction of Jaina literally being one of the most OP characters ever, using her father's seafaring vessel, the Proudmoore, carrying it on a bed of floating water, she turns the ship and creates arcane cannons. Now that part I thoroughly enjoyed, but then we go back again to the divisive bullshit with Sylvanas, the Warchief of the Horde, who tells Saurfang that if he threatens her again, she will kill him, and says to him, quote, "Maybe you'll get to see your son."
I had to see it for myself. Was this your plan all along? Is this how you meant to achieve victory? This honorless travesty?
Honor means nothing to a corpse, Saurfang. You have the luxury of underestimating death. But it is something with which I am intimately familiar. Maybe you don't care if your people die so long as it's honorable, but to me, this Horde is worth saving. Anyone who disagrees does not deserve to stand among us. So die your warrior's death, High Overlord Saurfang. It means little to me. Perhaps I will raise your broken body to serve me once more. Or perhaps you will have a chance to say hello to your son.
The Banshee Queen is a banshee bitch. She shows no remorse in killing innocents. She happily uses the plague to decimate the Horde and Alliance alike. She threatens Saurfang with death for daring to call out her atrocities. And then, when Bane barks up and tells her that it's bullshit to leave Saurfang outside to die, she tells him to tend to the living or leave and join Saurfang in death. To put my opinion into 3 little words, not my Warchief. I may summon demons from the pits of the twisting nether, and I may slaughter Alliance players all day long, but I do not disrespect the dead, and I do not threaten the generals of the Horde. Oh, and she blew up the Undercity with the plague, because if she can't have it, no one can. Then she just kind of pulled a Severus Snape and ghost fogged her ass out of there. So for the final bit of this controversial video, the Alliance's perspective on the battle for Lordaeron. It was fairly much the same, however we did see that Saurfang was taken to the stockades after Anduin convinced him that he shouldn't be killed, despite the fact that Saurfang clearly wants to be killed. We saw a little bit more of Jaina and the Alliance leaders, but that was really about it. Both sides are honestly fairly interchangeable. A couple of extra things, however. I once started out my excitement for Battle for Azeroth not really understanding what people meant when they railed against Sylvanas. I mean, they compared her to such dictators as Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin. But I see that I was merely blinded by my undying love for the Horde and all they should represent, you know, honor, glory, and strength. Sylvanas does not embody any of those qualities. She embodies hatred, pain, egocentrism. She stands only for the Forsaken. Hell, my one buddy pointed out that Nathanos actually says, for the Forsaken, not for the Horde. I don't care if the Undercity is the Forsaken's land and the Forsaken territory. It's for the Horde, buddy. None of this nationalism for the Forsaken like we matter more than everyone else, which is how Sylvanas is playing it off to be. She happily uses the blight on her own people if it wins her the battle. She threatens anyone with death who speaks out against her. Sylvanas uses underhand tactics to gain the sway of a battle. She is not a war chief. She's just as bad as the Lich King, just with a different name and a different silhouette. Loktar Ogar, if that term has any meaning under the glorious Sylvanas' dark rule. And for the Alliance. I've been your bi-factional hostess Aubrey from Evernath News, and enjoy the launch, please. I'm going to be taking this coming Friday off to spend a little time mulling over what to do with the expansion, how things might go, and to plan out some of our wonderful other WoW-related videos. Maybe I'll go more in-depth on an analysis of Il'gynoth's Whispers, but I'm going to take this week off to really enjoy the expansion, and please, don't let Sylvanas get you discouraged. Don't let some pissy little undead banshee ruin your enjoyment of the game. Have fun with BFA, and I hope to see you all in the next video.